Well, good morning or afternoon, depending on where you are located. So glad you could join us today. I'm Ron Burke, CEO of the Alliance for Water Efficiency. And today we're introducing a new guidance document that looks at water savings, how to estimate water savings from various consumer products. Next slide, please. I am joined today by Mo Urbesnik, representing the U.S. Green Building Council from California, Shannon Quinn with Procter Gamble, and Paul Rieg with Bluerisk. And we're going to walk you through, again, this new guidance document that we're releasing today. If we go to the next slide, please. Again, I'm Ron Burke with the Alliance for Water Efficiency. We're doing welcomes and introductions right now. I'll also just walk you through some of the background for how this project came together. Turn it over to Mo, who will walk you through some of the ways in which consumer products can contribute to water savings in the home. Turn it over then to Shannon with Procter & Gamble to give you some of the origin story around this project. And then finally, Paul Rieg with Bluerisk will walk you through some of the protocols that are outlined in the document for estimating water savings from consumer products. We'll wrap it up with questions and answers if all goes well. From you, the audience, if all goes well, we'll have about 15 minutes for that. Please put your questions in the chat. Next slide, please. For those of you who may be new to the Alliance for Water Efficiency, we're really the only nonprofit in North America that's laser focused on advancing water efficiency. Our mission is to, broadly speaking, promote efficient and sustainable use of water. We have more than 550 member organizations from throughout the United States and Canada, representing water utilities, corporations, state and local government agencies, nonprofits, consulting firms, and others. We support our mission and our members through cutting-edge research, providing tools and training, offering peer-to-peer learning experiences, and we also advocate for policies that really advance water efficiency. We tend to focus on the state and local levels for our policy work. If you're interested in becoming a member, and I hope you are if you're not already, check us out at a4we.org. Next slide, please. So again, about this guidance document. Those of you who work in this space probably realize or have some familiarity with the notion that it can be difficult to estimate water savings from consumer products that don't directly consume or move water, right? I mean, here at AWE, we have a lot of experience working with, plumbing fixtures and appliances and figuring out how to maximize water savings from those types of devices and how to measure those water savings. But consumer products can be a little more tricky, and there's really no formal guidance document for how to do this, or at least not until now. The primary audiences for this product are consumer products companies that design products that can help save water in the home, local water providers that may be, and sustainability managers at companies and who manage buildings, for example, that might be looking for additional ways to advance water savings in their communities and in their facilities. So that's those are the primary audiences. Next slide, please. So at the Alliance for Water Efficiency, we got into this project largely because we saw another opportunity to advance water savings, right? When consumers choose water saving products, the impact can be significant, especially when you multiply that across thousands or even millions of uses. Of course, we want to make sure that those water savings are real, right? And so this document helps encourage accurate and appropriate estimates and messaging about those water saving estimates. We also want to help spur product innovation in this space to the extent that companies can, get legitimate credit for their products advancing water savings. That can only help to spur product innovation. So that was another reason we were really happy to participate in this project. Next slide, please. And just a couple of high-level notes about the guidance document. It does focus on products used indoors. Indoor water use accounts for roughly 70% of total residential usage nationally. Now, we recognize, of course, that in arid regions of the country, and certainly during the summer across North America, outdoor water use can be quite significant. And so, this document we think has principles and guidance that can eventually be applied to outdoor water use as well. But because this is our first really attempt at this kind of guidance document, we decided to limit the scope and really focus on indoor water use. And there are many opportunities for indoor water savings that remain. Again, this guidance document can help open the door to new options. Next slide, please. So I'm going to turn it over now to Mo, who will share with you just some of the ways in which these types of products can be part of a comprehensive approach to indoor water savings. Mo, take it away.
Thanks, Ron. Thanks, everyone, for joining today. I'm going to be talking about a pilot we're doing here in Los Angeles called the 50-liter home pilot. I'm not sure how many people on the call know about the 50-liter home coalition, but in case you don't, it's a global initiative. Multinational organizations and companies have come together. It's convened by the World Business Council for Sustainable Development and the World Economic Forum. And they've come together to address the global challenge of water security, water scarcity, as well as climate change. 50 liters is an interesting thing, like why did they come up with 50 liters? But I'm not sure how many of the group also remembers Day Zero in Cape Town, South Africa. And that was the number that they came up with to be the minimal amount of water that is needed for basic needs of people per person, per capita, per day. And so the coalition's trying to prove this concept out. Is it possible to use 50 liters per home? And that's 13 gallons for all of us here who aren't on the metric system. But not only to prove out 50 liters, like, is it just like meet the needs and in considerations of public health, et cetera, but in fact, like where it doesn't impact performance or the customer experience, where 50 liters feels like 500 liters. So that's what the group set out to do. Next slide. Next slide, actually, sorry. So here's a list of some of the founding members: Procter Gamble, Electrolux, IKEA, Kohler, as well as companies like USGBC California, Epic Cleantech, Bluetech, Water Reuse. So a bunch of cities, communities, organizations, all over the world coming together to do this. And as you can see at the next slide, as one of the partners always says, where it makes it irresistible innovations. So with the goal of obviously trying to prove out this concept of 50 liters, one of the first things to do, next slide, was for the coalition to implement a pilot. They chose the city of Los Angeles for a lot of reasons. And then they also partnered with the USGBC California to actually be the local implementation partner who would implement the pilot. The objectives of the pilot were to test this integrated approach, to think about if we look at appliances, fixtures, and consumables, can we get down to 50 liters or 13 gallons, all while enhancing the household experience, less time, less effort, better performance of the products, etc. And in the end, to be able to take that information and figure out ways to scale it, to come up with rebates or incentives, policies that would actually scale the innovations. The pilot has 3 phases. The first phase was a baseline, just to get what is the baseline use in these single-family homes were chosen as for the pilot, 32 of them here in the San Fernando Valley part of Los Angeles. So phase 1, get the baseline. Phase 2, come in with market available technologies, things that you could buy at your local Home Depot, your local appliance store, etc. And then phase 3 would bringing on new innovations, things that were prototypes, not yet in the market yet, and see really how far we can go. Next slide. And I think, one of the questions that, Ron spoke to too is like, why does indoor water efficiency still matter? Oh, how cute is that, Sophie? Is that your kids? Um, um, and I think there are several reasons, and this doesn't have anything to do with that outdoors not important, but we've all been doing appliances and fixtures for a long time. Indoor measures are more consistent and predictable water savings all year long. Because not everywhere has outdoor irrigation, it's also globally replicable and scalable at a much larger level. We also believe that can be a better experience. Customers interact a lot more hands-on every day with water in their homes, and it can be less time, less effort, better performance. And I think people want smart, efficient fixtures and appliances. It's projects that we get high, or programs that we get high acceptance rate from, and it has a co-benefit of energy savings. So it's why it still matters. It's not that outdoor doesn't matter. It's that indoor still matters, and there's still opportunity. So that's one of the reasons why a big portion of this pilot is indoors. Next slide. Here's so 32 homes were selected for the pilot. These were homes that I will have to admit are somewhat biased, were already efficient. They already had Flume, the home monitoring water device. So they have the Flume, but then we went in and during the baseline period, we put a Drupal on every point of use, measuring hot and cold water from the kitchen faucet, the shower, every single point of use in the home. Next slide. So here's what we did in phase 2 of the scope. We retrofitted every area: kitchen, laundry, and bathroom. We did in the kitchen faucets, dishwashers, and we also gave them consumables. Dawn Power Wash, the Cascade Platinum for the dishwasher, the Dawn dishwashing liquid soap. So all of the consumables. In the laundry, they got a new washer and dryer. They got cold water Tide Pods. There's also through the whole house, but a Swiffer jet mop. In the bathroom, we did the bathroom sinks, the showers, the toilets. Plus, we also gave them hygiene devices like Pantene 2-in-1 shampoo, razors that don't require as long, or they have multiple uses, etc. So again, totally integrated, totally whole and holistic with this new idea of adding consumables. And next slide. And drum roll is, we've been able to get them down to 80 liters per capita per day, 87 liters, excuse me, which translates to 23 gallons. It's a 21% reduction from the control group, because we did, of the 32 homes, 16 of them were control. But that's half of what the LA average is. So these customers were already super efficient. We are extremely happy that we've been able to get this. Where, remember, phase 2 was market available technologies. Those were, 1.28 and 1.0 gallon toilets. They were appliances you could get they were basically at code faucets, appliances you could get at your local appliance dealer. And then also another great benefit was hot water use decreased by 23%. Next slide. Dish cleaning. So when we look at it, we call them jobs to be done, but we look at laundry, kitchen, and bathroom sort of separately as we're looking at this integrated solution here. We were able to decrease 34% of hot water use at the dish, and 15% less sink use, meaning people started using their dishwashers more. And so there was less with the Dawn Power Wash. There was no soaking or scrubbing requiring, less hand washing, less pre-rinsing, more use of the dishwasher. All of this resulted in some significant hot and cold water savings, and great feedback from the customers. They just said they were taking less time, they were doing less pre-rinsing, and they were happy with the results. Next slide. When looking at the laundry, we saw 55% hot water savings and 22% water per cycle, because we were giving them cold water Tide Pods, as well as machines that had a cold water option. With that, and had a cold water start. With that, more people were not only saving on hot water, but they didn't have to separate the darks and the whites, and so they were able to combine laundry and just do less laundry. So saw great results there. Excellent feedback. People probably the most happy with the laundry. They just don't have to think about it sorting clothes anymore and such. Next slide. And then the showers, we definitely cut the time, 20% less water and 6% less time spent in the shower. And that's mostly because of the consumables that because most of these people already had super efficient or efficient bathrooms, shower heads, and sinks. But with the Pantene 2-in-1 wash, the razors, etc., we were able to cut the time in the shower. Next slide. And next slide. And now we're moving to phase 3. So we're moving to more prototype products. We are moving to ultra efficient faucets 1.0 in the kitchen, 1.5 in the bathroom. We're working to a 1.25 gallon shower head and a lower volume toilet, as well as the next generation washer and dryer. All while we're still continuing to give them consumables, and we're gathering feedback, seeing how far that we can push it down. We already know we've come down far, but as Shannon and Paul are going to talk about, there's a lot that goes into actually proving out these savings. So even though we have some early results, we can't share them yet. They need to go through the process of getting validated, but we're super excited. One other thing that we are putting into, which is we're just got approved by the city of Los Angeles, is a recirculating shower. So just wanted to give that little update. And I think that's it on my slides.
Awesome. Thanks, Mo.
Thank
So we can go to the next slide. As you can kind of see from these pilot results, there still are a lot of opportunities to reduce indoor household water use, and we think that consumer products can play an important role. At P&G, we produce some of the biggest and best known consumer brands in the world. Maybe you recognize some of these and have them in your own homes. And if you look across these and think about how you use them, water is vital to P&G because about 70% of our products need water to be used. This gives us a really good opportunity to develop products that solve not only everyday problems, but can also have this irresistible superiority, what Mo had referenced, like make the experience enjoyable while also helping to reduce water use. Next slide, please. So you saw a couple featured before, but just to give some tangible examples and the types of water savings claims that we already have in the marketplace, the Swiffer Power Mop could save up to 70 gallons of water versus a mop and bucket. Dawn Power Wash, it's got this spray activated suds technology, so it helps to actually minimize the amount of water that you need to hand wash your dishes until the very final rinse when you could rinse everything off. And compared to traditional soaps, it's about a 50% water savings when you look at the tap running continuously during dishwashing. And finally, we have our Cascade Platinum Plus, which is our auto dishwashing product. And products researchers found that many Americans still keep their sink running during the hand dishwashing process. And so if we assume that the sink is running, it uses 24 gallons of water to clean a full load of dishes. And while your dishwasher just uses 4 gallons for a whole cycle with an Energy Star certified dishwasher. So these products and these product claims are kind of a good combination of the superior experience, getting the job done while also helping to save water. Next slide, please. The water savings claims for these products are really a result of consumer habits and practices studies and the use of best available data. We have decades of experience understanding how people are using the products, how they're performing these household tasks, and also how that interaction is occurring with water. And it's through this research, the innovation, and the insights that we have actually been able to develop these robust and meaningful claims for how products can be used to reduce water use during household tasks. But what we noticed over the years was that there wasn't a set of external best practices out there, or best available data, or communications principles for this type of water-saving consumer product claim. Next slide. And that's really why, through the Bonneville Environmental Foundation, we decided to support the development of this guidance and insights for estimating and communicating water savings, which was led by the Alliance for Water Efficiency in collaboration with Bluerisk. The expertise from AWE in household water efficiency, the practices and the data combined with our real world experience in water savings claims for consumer products has really enabled, I believe, the creation of a practical guidance that's now available for use across the industry and beyond. So I'll pass it over to Paul from Bluerisk so he can go into the content and the resources that you can find in the new guidance.
Great. Thanks, Shannon. And welcome, everyone. Yeah, we can go to the next slide. I want to provide a bit of an overview of the guidance document itself, what it contains, the steps, and then bring it to light with a practical case study of how it could be applied. So in terms of the outline, if you go to the next slide, I want to kind of build on what Shannon was sharing to align on the specific objective of the guide and what it includes and doesn't include, the approach we took to developing it, the steps that it includes with some of those additional resources that were alluded to, and then wrap up with a case study. And after that, open it up for Q&A. So we go to the next slide. The intent of this guidance document is really to enable organizations to make credible claims related to those potential water savings that we were hearing about, specifically water savings associated with consumer product innovations and campaigns that result in savings in in-use water. The document achieves that by doing three things. One, it provides kind of a very practical step-by-step process that anybody can follow to estimate those potential savings. Two, it provides information on the best available data that you could use for that. I think that was one of the things that we'd identified was really missing, right? A lack of understanding of consistent, reliable data. And then lastly, but not least, it really provides insights into how to communicate in an effective way, right? So some practical tips and considerations for how to communicate those savings. So that's what the document set out to do. If you go to the next slide, what we had to start with was a set of principles for how to develop this, like what does good look like, right? What are we going to achieve? And we landed on three design considerations that were really critical for us to achieve those objectives. The first is the guidance has to be actionable. In other words, it has to lead to real life decision making within organizations. This is not an academic exercise or a research project. It's something that, has been designed to drive action. The results that it helps you estimate have to be credible, right? And that's critical for these results to be trusted by key stakeholder groups, right? That are going to be either receiving the results or using the results. And then lastly, it has to be practical. It has to be accessible and useful for practitioners within organizations that may be interested in applying this. So these were the three key considerations going into it. And I think Ron already touched on this and Shannon did too. We also had to decide where to start, right? And recognizing that there's a ton of great innovations and products that are driving water savings at the household level, we decided to really start with consumer products in the personal care and cleaning categories, specifically for indoor water use in residential settings. And that's just because we had to start somewhere. And we couldn't do all of it. So, what's not included is non-residential uses, products or innovations related to food or cooking, as well as those related to outdoor water use or major indoor fixtures and appliances. Ron mentioned this already. The steps and the principles and the considerations that inform this guidance translate perfectly to all of those cases, right? So, with very little additional work, I'm sure a lot of this can be applicable, but it would go beyond the scope of what's included here. And most importantly, it would go beyond the scope of the data that's being recommended as part of this guidance. One other thing, if you go to the next slide, One other thing to keep in mind here on the left, on the right, sorry, you see the in-home water use product categories that I just referred to. That's the, I'm not going to read through it, but that's the list of product categories that was included and the related fixture. The other thing that we had to do up front is think about how these product categories drive the savings, right? So there are different pathways by which these products can yield in-home water savings. And specifically, we landed on 5, right? The first one, the product may require no water compared to a product that does require water. Another one is a product may require less water than an equivalent product. A product may also influence behavior, right? So think about a toothbrush, electric toothbrush that may help you remember to turn off the tap, right? So maybe the product is helping guide and influence that behavior. There are also products that enable efficiency in the appliance, right, that is being used. And then lastly, there are products that are associated to potential education campaigns and awareness raising, right? So this is something else that is very important. We'll touch on the steps now, but that upfront, as we were designing the guidance, we had to align on, and this reflects the experience that Shannon was mentioning of decades of engagement in market with consumers to really understand how products are used, and based on that, what are the pathways or innovations that are actually yielding the savings. So if we go to the next slide, all this was kind of done up front. And once we were aligned on that, we kind of started to think through, okay, what are the steps an organization has to go through to really estimate those potential savings? And we landed on 5 steps. This builds on, I would say, probably 2 decades of experience working on similar guidance in other realms of corporate engagement on the topic of water. So these steps aren't new to anybody working on sustainability, but they've been drafted and scoped in a way that's specifically applicable to the scope of this guidance. So step 1, we just touched on this. Okay, for the product that you're thinking about, what is the pathway or mechanism by which it's going to save water, right? We talked about potentially not using water, using less water, influencing behavior, enabling appliance efficiency, or being associated with an education or awareness raising campaign. So that's the first step, really thinking about and understanding, okay, what is the pathway to save water? The second is, once you know the pathway and you have your product in mind, you have to understand and estimate what the baseline water use was before the product was deployed in the market, or the innovation or the campaign, right? So to do that, you need to understand how much water is being used per time being used with the product, how many times over a selected time period, right, you're considering, right, when you're estimating that baseline, and then the number of consumers using that product, right? So having all of that will allow you to estimate, pre-deployment of the innovation or the campaign, what is the estimated water use? That's step 2. Next is, okay, step 3. Once you have the innovation or the awareness raising campaign deployed in the market, understand the water use with this innovation in place, right? So you have to then again estimate, okay, how much water is being used per number of times during the duration of the assessment, and then how many consumers are being considered within the scope of that estimate. Once you have that done, you go into step 4 and you can compare what was the water use associated to product before, and what is the water use associated with that product after the innovation or after that campaign. And you can basically estimate the difference, and that difference is the saving that can be attributed to that innovation or to that educational campaign. And once you have that, you can start to think about how you're going to communicate. Very important, if you look at the header for step 5, it says communicate with care, right? One of the main objectives of the guidance is helping you communicate to customers and other stakeholders in a way that's credible and trusted. And that requires care, right? And it requires being careful. The guidance provides some key considerations for how to do that. If we go to the next slide, to really help practitioners understand how to prepare and deploy those communications in a market. There are 5 principles for communicating those potential savings. The first one is making sure it's relatable, right? So your consumers need to be able to understand what you're talking about when you're talking about savings. You have to do it in a consistent way, particularly if you're scaling up and down across a geography or different sizes of a product, right? Make sure that when you're doing that, assumptions and data and scale is done consistently. Being transparent, right? Inevitably, there are going to be assumptions that go into these estimates, so make sure you're transparent about that. Also transparent about the data that's being used, so that a consumer or other stakeholder that's looking at it can really understand how you derive that number, how you derive that estimated savings. It has to be instructive, right? So it has to be clear how a consumer should or can use the product to potentially achieve those savings. And then lastly, be conservative, right? As you'll see, many times you're going to use a range based on insights from consumers, right? So if you do have a range, always try to be conservative with that to really minimize the risk of overclaiming a potential savings and misleading your customers. So all that's included in the guidance, as well as some pretty important resources in the appendix. There's some key considerations, right? Mostly things to keep in mind as you embark in this journey. All of those building on firsthand experience of companies that have a lot of experience, like Shannon was saying. We also benefited from AWA's experience in the market to be able to identify what's the best data, right? What data sources should I use? At what scale are they available? What are the sources? So that's all included for the US and Canada, which I think is a tremendous asset. It's extremely valuable. And then lastly, the guidance also alludes to key challenges to keep in mind as you embark in this. So all of this is included. And I think maybe what we can do now is go through a practical example to see how this is applied, and then open it up for Q&A. So if we go to the next slide, we can basically go through an illustrative example. So think of a 2-in-1 shampoo and conditioner product that is being launched. A company develops this product. We can call it product Z. And the product combines the benefits, but also the performance of what used to be 2 separate products, so shampoo and a conditioner, and now it's available in one. So basically, by doing that, it's going to require a one less step in the shower, resulting in less time and therefore potential water savings. We go to the next slide. We'd want to start, as I mentioned earlier, thinking about, okay, how is this innovation in this product going to drive savings, right? And in this case, the innovation is about putting forward a product that is still going to use water, but less water than the alternative, right? As I mentioned, right? Previously, there was kind of using 2 products. It took more time. Now you can achieve the same performance and outcomes with one product, which requires less time and therefore requires less water for it to be used. I think upfront, once you know that, you'd really want to start going through and identifying the data sources that you're going to need, right? So in this case, if we're thinking about a product required in a shower, you need to understand the flow rates of shower heads. The guidance, recommends data for that. You'd want to understand the estimated duration of using a shampoo and conditioner. If you have access to consumer surveys, you'd want to pull from that or from other data sources that would allow for that to be understood and documented. And then you want to also understand the average number of showers per person per day, right? So again, the guidance provides insight into where you may find that data. And as we just discussed a second ago, as you start to do that, you really want to start documenting any assumptions that you're making so that you can be transparent around how you derive that estimated savings. So with all that in mind, you could go to step 2 to really start to think about, okay, what is my baseline, right? What is the water use associated with the product pre-innovation? So we go to the next slide. In this case, the baseline is you're using a shampoo and a conditioner, right, separately. So you'd want to understand the time it takes to use both of those. And you'd want to understand the average flow rate for the shower head, which we discussed, and we had that data. So you'd say, okay, well, say using shampoo is 1 minute, using conditioners, 2.5 minutes, that's 3.5 minutes, and then the flow rate of a average shower head is 2.1 gallons per minute. If you multiply that, you can get the estimated gallons per use during those baseline scenario, right? So it's 7.35 gallons per use if you're using a separate shampoo and conditioner. So that's step 2. Now you need to say, okay, what does that look like after the innovation? In this case, after the deployment of a 2-in-1 shampoo and conditioner. So you work with your research teams and you come up with the estimated time required to adequately use the new innovation, right? And you come up with, okay, so it's 1 minute, right? So your new time using the product is 1 minute instead of 3.5 minutes. The average flow rate is the same because you're not affecting the flow rate of the shower head. So with that, you can estimate the water use per product use with this innovation. In this case, it's 2.1 gallons per use of the combined 2-in-1 shampoo and conditioner that we described. So now you have your baseline, you have your with innovation estimate of water use, and with that you go into step 4, which is on the next slide, to look at what the difference is. And when you think about this, or when you're in step 4, you probably want to start with estimating kind of the difference per product use. So, okay, what's the estimated water use using 2 products, and you subtract the water use using the 2-in-1 product. The difference is 5.25 gallons each, saved each time you're using the product, right? So that's your per product use savings. And then you can think about whether you need to translate that into a different time step, right? You may want to say, okay, what does that mean per week or per year, right? Per customer. And, you can take that per use, estimate, okay, how many times a person takes a shower per day or per week, according to the data that's available, and start multiplying that to determine savings per week and with that savings per year, right? So if you do that, on average, a person takes 4.83 showers per week, and you're saving 5.25 gallons per use. You can get your per week savings, right? So 25.3 gallons saved per week. And from that, you can go to a year and say, okay, wow, per year, you're saving upwards of 1,300 gallons, right? So this gives you that ability, as we talked about earlier, to build on robust data at the right scale and then adjust that to estimate the associated savings across different time steps. If we go to the next slide. One thing that in this case the company may want to do is say, well, it's good to know what those savings are per use at different time steps, but we also may want to know what the associated savings are per product, right? So you need to work with your product innovation and engineering and design team to understand with adequate use, right, how many washes you'd get out of this 2-in-1 shampoo and conditioner, right? It's hard to estimate, so you're probably going to have a range, right? They're probably not going to say, it's this many washes. Maybe you have a range, in this case, say between 25 and 35 washes per bottle. And again, that would be a bottle of a specific size, right? If you're going to change sizes, you'd want to adjust your number. And with that, you can then estimate your potential savings per bottle, right? I'm not going to run through it, but you'd have your low end, right? Okay, we'll say in the low end, it's 25 uses per bottle times 5.25 gallons saved per use. That gives you your estimated gallons saved per bottle. And then you could do the same thing for the high end. So that gives you a lot of information to work with and to start to think about how you're going to want to communicate those potential savings, which takes us into step 5. We go to step 5, we go to the next slide. Communicate with care, right? So at this point, you'd probably work with your communications, your marketing, your brand, your consumer engagement team to think about how are we going to communicate this to our consumers, right? And in this case, they decide to run an ad for this new product, and they choose to use the following text, right? Save a step, and you can save 5 gallons of water each time you use product Z's new 2-in-1 formula, right? So with this, right, you'd be prepared to go and start communicating. Some things to keep in mind. For this product Z, the savings per bottle estimates are scaled appropriately, as I mentioned, to different size bottles, right? So you're not overestimating or underestimating. As you could see, the team decides to use a slightly lower number of the range, right? I think it was 5.25, and we said, okay, we're just going to communicate around 5 to be conservative. Each product has a thermometer kind of style window on it so that a consumer understands how much water is being saved as they use the product. And then the team also extrapolates the potential savings at a national level and documents the caveats and assumptions and details of that, but they share that through a blog, right? So they choose a different means of communicating, of activating the campaign that's appropriate to the type of information that they have. So some of this information goes into an ad, some of it goes on the bottle, and then lastly, some of those more kind of technical assumptions and methods that went into it are then communicated in a blog post. We go to the next slide. How does this compare with those 5 principles for communicating with care? Relatable, you probably picked up on this already, but rather than focusing on time saved, right, with the 2-in-1, the marketing team decides to talk about the water saved, right, as a result of using that product, right? So again, relating to what the your customers, your consumers are thinking about and care about. Secondly, consistent, right? We talked about savings per use. We talked about savings per bottle. We talked about savings at a national level, right? Throughout those estimates, the team was using consistent assumptions and data throughout, right? So those estimates and those messages are all drawn from the same set of assumptions and same information. Very transparent, right? So the team cites the sources, includes caveats and assumptions and documents, and shares a lot of that in a blog, right? So those consumers that are interested in the ad or interested in what they see in the product, if they go to the website, they have a place to find all the background information on how those estimated savings were achieved and calculated. It's instructive, right? So it talks clearly about spending less time applying shampoo and conditioner, and therefore that reduction in time of using the product relates to a potential water savings. And then it's conservative. As I mentioned earlier, there is a range, and the team chooses to use kind of that lower side to avoid misleading the potential savings associated to that product. So anyway, so this is an illustrative case study. I'm sure everyone joining me today on the call can think of many other applications of how this guidance can be applied, but hopefully this is useful and provides some insights into how this guidance can be applied to estimate those potential savings associated to either product innovations or product campaigns that lead to reductions in water use at the household level. With that, I'm going to hand it back to Ron and open it up for our Q&A.
Mm-hmm. All right. Thank you so much, Paul. And again, just a big thanks to Procter Gamble, the Bonneville Environmental Foundation, who partnered with us on this project. Big thanks to Paul, who has a ton of expertise in this space. And it was just especially valuable as we put this guidance. His expertise was incredibly valuable as we put this guidance document together. Thank you, Mo, for being here and sharing with us your experiences on the 50-liter homes project. Really exciting to see how these consumer products are playing a part in those objectives. We're going to take questions now, and if you haven't put your question in the chat already, please do. We have a couple of questions that go to essentially to what extent, if any, does the guidance document account for like upstream water use associated with the manufacturing and kind of delivery of these products? And correct me if I'm wrong, team, but we specifically decided not to attempt to account for those upstream uses and really just focus on the in-house, in this case, water savings potential. I don't know if Paul or Shannon, do you want to add anything to that, to my answer there?
Yeah, sure. So exactly right. It's out of scope for this guidance. Really where we saw the gap was in estimating and communicating, having consistent guidance there, and some key principles for water use in the home and consumer use of the product and the water associated with the use of those products and the opportunity to save water during your daily household tasks. There are other places out there, other like CDP water is one place where you can companies can look to for those definitions about how to account for water being used and consumed during the production of products. Life cycle assessment analysis is also a tool that's used very often with consumer products companies, including Procter & Gamble, where we can really look across the life cycle to understand water withdrawn, where water is being withdrawn and at what levels. We can actually compare products during the innovation phase to see which ones will have trade-offs, which ones will have, less water usage, and which stage we see the usage being decreased. And then, there are also other goals and programs. P&G has a focus area as part of our water strategy to reduce water use in operations. And so we have goals specific to the down or the upstream or the water in operations, how we can reduce there and track and report progress. So yes, to summarize, it is out of scope for this guidance, but it is represented in other parts of programs and other reporting and tracking areas.
Awesome. All right. Another question essentially goes to what extent does the guidance assume or address appropriate use of the product or inappropriate use of the product? I think we all recognize that from one person to the next, that product may get used somewhat differently, right? And there may be ways to use that product to save water, but just because the person has access to that product and has it in their hands doesn't mean they're going to use it that way, right? So to what extent do we address that? Paul
Yeah.
or Shannon, go for it. Yeah.
I might jump in on this one too, because this
Yeah.
was something we talked as a project team a
Yes.
lot,
Yeah.
like just the reality of consumer products. We can't be in everyone's homes. We don't want to be in everyone's homes to see how they're
Right.
using the products, but we do, with their consent, go into consumer homes. I think Mo showed some of those, like the ability to actually track in real time, being outside of their homes, how much water they're using. Because oftentimes consumers will tell us, people using our products will tell us one thing, and in reality, they're using it differently, or they're actually leaving the sink running when they don't think that they are. So, we do in the guidance spend time talking about making sure that you're using, well-designed consumer research and consumer studies to inform your claims. So that should be considered. And where it's not available or you have less certainty, that's really where the communications principles come in, and making sure you're erring on the side of conservatism, being really transparent about what that claim is telling us and what it was informed by.
Okay. Well, on a related question that we have here in the chat, and I think this probably best goes to Mo. Someone asked, hey, with the Feed It 50-liter home project, looks like, and you acknowledge this, Mo, right? You've already got the choir, so to speak, right, involved in this choral sing. The question was essentially, how do we get folks who aren't necessarily in the choir on board with something like this?
Yeah, I mean, they definitely were biased. I mean, they obviously are very different people. They're couples, young, old kids, roommates, etc. So there is some different demographics in there. But I think when we're thinking about scaling, we need to test it out. We're in the process of working with a water supplier to look at scaling the whole home retrofit and consumables to about 200 homes, and we'll be able to get a broader understanding of of the bigger community. But I think the idea that it makes it easier, less time, those things resonate with everyone. They resonated across the board with all of our participants. It's like, you made my life easier, and most of it, we didn't give people instructions with the consumables. We just gave the consumables because most of them make common sense. Like, it's not like, some people chose not to use them. Some people didn't use several versions of the products. But I think that's our big next step, is how do we scale? How do we scale this where we've shown that with a great appliance and a great consumable product and a great fixture, we can get use down this low? How do we scale that? I think it's a big question that all of us should be talking about.
Yeah, great. Another question essentially asked, to what extent, if any, are these water saving projects? Let me take a step back. I think the question is, did we account for in this guidance document the potential for these potentially water saving consumer products to have disbenefits that unrelated to water savings, like it creates more, landfill waste, or it's not as good for your public health, like in terms of like your personal safety and health, those kind of questions. Again, I mean, I think that was largely beyond the scope of this project. There are protections, consumer, kind of at the both local, state, and federal levels, protections in place to ensure that products sold in the marketplace, consumer products, are safe, for use. And so we didn't get into that question with this scope, nor did we get into questions of, well, does this product create more, kind of solid waste, but more water savings? We did not look at those types of trade-offs. I mean, to be honest, the examples that we were largely focused on as kind of case studies, like the one that Paul shared, and I'm just, off the top of my head, I can't think of any that were like, oh my gosh, that was such a massive trade-off. Yeah, we saved water, but look at all the additional garbage going to landfills. I mean, that's a possibility, right? I suppose, but again, just to summarize, that was not within the scope of this project. And Paul, yeah, feel free to respond.
Yeah, maybe just to build on that, Ron, on what Shannon shared earlier, all of those considerations a company will typically factor into this decision-making process regardless, right? Those processes exist, LCA databases and expertise exist, like Shannon said. So this guidance is really looking to drive additionality in what was already available to companies. And a lot of the controls to prevent those unintended consequences were already available to companies. What wasn't available is to say, from this innovation, how could I credibly, estimate potential water saving? So that's why it's not there. It's not because it's not important. It's because that information and those processes and those controls already exist. And most companies that are going to be using this, it's part of a much broader set of strategies and procedures that they already have in place within their, product innovation, design, and marketing teams already. So I don't know, Shannon, if you want to add to that, but I think it's just a very important clarification.
Yeah, definitely. And in the guidance, we reference that, making sure there aren't any significant negative trade-offs when you're coming out with these types of claims. But knowing that there are other tools that exist, and companies are now looking across the life cycle of the product to make sure there are no significant negative trade-offs. But I think on the other hand, what's also referenced in the guidance are the additional benefits that you see from water saving. So, reduction in energy. You saw that in some of Mo's, the results from the 50-liter home pilot in Los Angeles. We see energy savings, see people being, happier with their, having more time and being able to have a product that works in an area where they could feel proud too, because they're helping to reduce water. So I think there are also a lot of other benefits that come from this that the guidance doesn't lay out a process to estimate. But I think that there's a lot of opportunity to look at the holistic benefits associated with reducing water use.
Yeah, for sure. Okay, we have a couple more minutes here. Yes, Joseph, thank you for noting that the new residential end uses of water study will be out next year. That was not available. That data is still not available. So we use the currently available data. Question is, will we update the guidance document with that new data? I think that's TBD. It's a possibility. We would have to kind of circle back with the project team and decide that. We have not made a yes or no decision at this time. Yeah. Let's see. We also were asked, by the way, I see some interesting ideas in here about other ways to save water. And I think it's certainly worth noting that, the Alliance for Water Efficiency, we're involved with, and our membership, right, it's involved with so many different ways to save water, both indoors and outdoors. This guidance document is really intended to shed light on a pathway to water savings that hasn't been explored as much, right? We're not suggesting that it do this instead of, this is kind of an all of the above approach, right? We need to really work on all fronts to address water scarcity, to really conserve water, be efficient with water use in ways that benefit the environment, our pocketbooks, and the world more broadly. So I see some really interesting ideas in here to kind of maybe incorporate what we've done here into some broader strategies, and I love it. Thomas, thank you for that. I think I'll follow up with you. Some interesting ideas there. Thank you so much. Yeah, let's see. I think, so there was a question about affordability in here. I think Shannon, you touched on this a bit already. We, to the extent that one can save water, especially both cold and hot water, but on the hot water side, you can save energy as well and reduce both your water and your energy utility bills. So I think that's another upside, to these types of products that can help address affordability. I think the affordability question in the water space is a big one, right? And AWE and a lot of folks I'm sure in this call are very, very engaged in that space. I think these types of products can help, but ultimately, we're looking at rate making, right, and appliances and fixtures and finding and addressing leaks. There's a lot of different ways that we can address affordability as well that go beyond just, consumer products that help save water. But again, this is another piece of the puzzle, right? Go ahead, Mo.
I think one interesting to think is, how do we incentivize these? I think it's much more challenging because of water agencies' service areas, but how do we figure out a way to incentivize them so that they are affordable to everyone? Everyone can gain access to it in the water agency. I think it's something we need to just be thinking about.
Yeah, and I know we have some water agency representatives on the call today, and while we, for the most part, addressed today, how product manufacturers and marketers and others can evaluate these savings and communicate them. I think there's some really valuable insights in this document as well for water utilities that are looking for new ways, to your point, Mo, to advance water efficiency. Again, this is a relatively unexplored space, and we're looking forward to working with some of our members to find ways to incentivize these types of products. Again, that have gone through this type of protocol to verify the water savings. We're just about out of time. Let me see. I think, Kelly mentioned in the chat already that we will be sending out both the video of this webinar, plus the slides, plus the guidance document to everyone who registered. So you will have that relatively soon. I think I'm going to go ahead and wrap it up here unless there's any final comments from our speakers. All right. Well, thank you all for joining us. We really appreciate it. And again, please look us up online at the Alliance for Water Efficiency if you haven't already. We hope to connect with you in the future. Take care, everyone.
Thank you.